Let's give everybody out here in the ring as we get started with our breeding sheep show here a round of applause. These two young exhibitors, maybe a smaller breeding stock show, but I think if you step back and analyze the quality of the youth and the quality of the stock, they deserve the accolades as we begin kicking off the day. I'm going to leave them as they stand, and I'm going to start young lady in green here in terms of being our class winner and our champion overall for the breeding sheep show. And I'll talk the differences within the pair of two sheep. I think the biggest one that's the most inevitable is just a performance difference. I think the young lady's black-headed ewe is one that's just bolder in terms of body and center cavity. I think she's a higher performing sheep. She's bigger in her kind. She's farther along or more advanced in the flank depth and softness and maturity that she's got to her center cavity. And then you take that in terms of balance from the outside. I think that's where we can tie some of those puzzle pieces together. That sheep's softer bellied. She's more she's better balanced in terms of how her lines are drawn, and inevitably she's more elevated in her chest and her neck and her shoulder blade. And I still think with that added dimension and volume that she's the trimmer option in terms of condition and fat content in relation to the pair. So that's where I land on a starting process for her. Not to take anything away from the young men that'll be reserved here. I think in terms of sheep that balances top line strength in relation to feet and leg posture, that sheep's long neck, she's extended. A sheep that when you analyze her body, she's one maybe that we need to just change her flank design, maybe give her a little bit more pin width, a little bit more width as you study her from behind, and correlate that down to the ground. When you watch him go away and when you watch him from a rear view, I think that we just need to pry that one apart in terms of base width all the way through to be able to excel the young lady that wins. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause as I go and congratulate them on their success today.
Please bring. Please bring your Class 1 Dorsets to the holding ring. Class 1 Dorsets to the holding ring. Your breeding sheep champion went to Peyton Norman, and your breeding sheep reserve went to Kobe Norman.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Eddy County Fair Market Lamb Show. Today, sorting our lambs will be Corey Taylor from Tarkington, Texas, which I learned is north of Houston. He says the weather here is better than back home. It's a little drier. Don't sweat as much. He is an ag science instructor. Him and his wife Allison and their two sons Landon and Hudson own Taylor Livestock. And he's a graduate of Texas A&M University, and we sure appreciate him coming out today. Let's give a nice round of applause for Mr. Taylor.
Please bring your Class 1 crossbreeds to the holding pen. Your first class crossbreeds to the holding pen. We need your Class 1 crosses to the holding pen. Your Class 1 crosses to the holding pen.
Well, I think a great way to start out here in the Dorset breed and the Market Lamb Show. I think as we analyze this particular breed, there's, you got to take into account several different things. Number one, we are at a market lamb show, muscle and all those things are important. Young lady, if you'll come, you guys just lead your sheep right here on a profile in line. I think too, though, after you analyze those things in this class, you have to realize there are some weight differences in here. There's maturity differences in each one of these sheep, and all those things are valuable or important to talk about. But at the end of the day, we're going to start with one that in my mind, I never questioned beating when we started this particular class. And the breed here, I think that sheep exemplifies a lot of things that a Dorset needs to be in terms of muscle shape and athleticism. That one takes the cake. That sheep's trim, he's round caged, he's shallow, he runs uphill, and with all those things in terms of touch and tone, he's still athletic, he's still plenty dimensional in terms of power. I think in this particular class, there's not a lot of negatives to say, I think, in relation to his counterparts. Now, in a perfect world, are there some things we could change? Yes, I maybe would like to change the set to his hock just a little bit from the side. He's got a little extra bend or a little extra set to his hock. And part of that, I think, is honestly is just the way we faded our leg wool in off the front of his hock. If we could change that. I think that sheep's not the best in terms of the squareness of his loin edge out here all the way through. He's not near as heavy conditioned as some of them out here. And I think in terms of future, that's something that's going to have to come. But I still think that sheep easily puts together the most positives for me to find amongst this set and roll with. I think from there you have some differences in the way you got to talk and see and think through what you're doing. I think the two sheep in second or third are built similar in ways, but I think they're different as well. I'll tell you where I see them the same. I see both of those sheep as more mature than my class winner. I see those sheep as farther along in terms of their pattern. I see those sheep to both have fore-rib body shape and rack shape dimension. I think from there some things start to change, and I'll tell you where I see the differences in the two. I like the way that the one that I put second balances body type together just a shade more, because when you read him from his last rib back, he's bolder. He's bigger in his pin set, he's squarer in his upper hip, and genuinely he's one that I think carries more shape and product through from his last rib back. Now, is he quite as stout featured in terms of just his running gear, his feet and legs? No, he may not be just quite as stout. I think he's just a shade heavier condition than the sheep I have in third, but if I step in behind him and read him, I think he's still more genuine. I think he opens up better and carries his with the cavity, with the pin set and power from behind all the way through. From the profile, I think the sheep that's in third easily works his way up and can contend with any one of them that's out here. That sheep's elevated in his chest, he's good in his flank set, he's level. Boy, he's stout in terms of his feature. He's a notch trimmer than the sheep I put in second. I think when you step in and analyze him from behind is where I start to struggle with this one just a shade more. He's one that when I read him in terms of his pin set and his upper hip and the shape to his stifle, I think he needs to be squarer. I think he needs to be more product oriented there to beat the two sheep that are ahead of him in class. But boy, you got to admire, you got to love his look, his build, his design from the outside, and appreciate that one when when that young lady sets that sheep in motion. Young man sheep here in fourth. I think another sheep that, initially when you walk out, he gives up weight. We talked about that earlier in terms of just maturity, size, weight, age, all those things. But guys, there's a lot of good in that sheep still. He's one that's dimensional in terms of his rack. He's square in terms of his upper hip. His base width is genuine. The sheep's just trim. He's at a deficit of weight. He's at a deficit of age out here. And that's part of what works him down into fourth. I think if we can just get that sheep a little bit farther along, I think he stands a little more competition out here. And the two sheep that round out here in terms of finishing up this particular breed, both sheep that have volume, both sheep that have dimension. Maybe the one in fourth we could just make a little bit better built in terms of his chest and the boldness of his forerib and the shape that he's got down his spine. And sure would like to take the sheep that's in that rounds out this class and just give him a true, more genuine athletic touch all the way through. Want to pick him up, strengthen him on his pasterns just a shade, give him a shot more bone work to match his body type. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause. A really, really great breed and a really, really good set of kids.
Your champion Dorset went to Madison Mancha from Artesia FFA. Your reserve Dorset went to Swayze Fulmar from Cottonwood 4-H. Third went to Kyla Hughes from Country Clovers. Fourth went to Ryan Wood, Carlsbad FFA. Fifth went to Cage Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. And sixth went to Colton Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Please bring your Class 2 crosses to the holding pen. Class 2 crosses to the holding pen. We need your Class 2 crosses to the holding pin. Class 2 crosses to the holding pin.
I think as we start out our first class of crosses here, I find a combination sheep to start out this particular set. I do think the young lady that leads off has got the sheep that combines the look of a few we've got with the muscle of a few that we've got out here in terms of balance and parts and pieces. Is that one the most exotic, or is that one the most just overall wild looking? No. But I think that sheep balances and blends very well. I think that sheep from the ground up foundationally is the widest, the boldest, and the most mature in terms of muscle shape and touch. I think that sheep handles with a tremendous amount of back shape and continues to get wider as we read that one from behind. And I think that sheep balances all that well when set in motion. I still like an ideal look out of that sheep. That one balances well, his chest floor's up in him, his flank set and body fill are right. In a perfect world, we could tie him just a notch smoother into his loin edge and lengthen his hip out just a notch. I think that sheep wins this class pretty particularly easily for me, and I'm very confident in a place to land on that one. I'll tell you guys, it's a challenge in second and third. You're looking at two completely different breeds of sheep, and we're going to talk the merit that both of them have. I like the stoutness, the foot size, and genuine bone work that the sheep in second has. That one's trim, that one's long-sided, and that one's attractive when you look at that one in terms of front end build, neck, chest, and shoulder attachment. For me, honestly, that one gets to start to run out of gas just a little bit when you read him from his last rib back. He's not as big pinned, he's not as shapely stifled. We need to just give him a shot more power to work up a little higher. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Dorper here that's in third. Young lady, that one's chocked full of muscle. That one's got an explosive center body. That one's really big in terms of rack shape, really smooth in terms of how that one ties into his loin edge, and I love the way he ties underneath his chest and blade. For me, when you step in behind him, I don't think he necessarily corrects the one I put in second in terms of pin width and stifle shape. And I wish from the outside that one was just a notch stronger in terms of his top line. And maybe, if I ever so slightly could, melt him down just a little bit in terms of his condition over his forerib and flatten him out in his shoulder just a notch. I think that when we swap the pair, that's a challenge. I wouldn't argue with you if you agree that one could go second. We could swap them and both be on the same page. A sheep that we work down the line here, young lady coming out next, one in terms of just volume and dimension, I think is the trim handling, one of the three remaining. I think that one, when you analyze this young lady's sheep, just gives up too much mass for me in terms of overall width. I like the build, I like the look from that one on the outside, especially when that one's in motion. We just got to give that one a shot more true volume of muscle all the way through to work up higher. And I think that kind of goes same song, second verse as we work down into class. We just need to pry those guys apart a little more, maybe some condition differences all the way through, give them a little bit more product. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause on our first class of crosses.
First place went to Peyton Putman, Country Clovers. Second went to Jaylee England, Cottonwood 4-H. Third went to Madison Mancha, Artesia FFA. Fourth went to Kobe Norman, Loving 4-H, tag 84939. Fifth went to Kobe Norman, Loving 4-H. And sixth went to Peyton Norman, Loving 4-H. Please bring your Class 3 crosses to the holding pen. Class 3 crosses to the holding pen. Clay Kincaid, we need you at the show ring. Clay Kincaid.
I think an awfully challenging class, and I'll tell you why. I don't know if I find one in here that just jumps out and hits me as a clear cut or an easy winner. There's some differences that you have to take into account, and I'm going to be honest with you. I think the top two are as different as they can be all the way through without a question. But I think if you compare some differences in the pair and talk about them, the one that I think just hits me a shade harder between the two is the young lady sheep that I lead off with. I'm going to be the first to tell you he's not perfect, neither is the one in second. The one that wins is stouter featured at the ground. I think that's a sheep that's intense, round in terms of his rib cage. He's got shape down his spine. He's trim. He's long-sided. He's elevated and extended. I think where he gets into a question for me is when I put him in motion and I read him today. Honestly, guys, I wish he was a notch fatter. I wish he was a notch farther along, because I don't read that one to carry his width all the way down through his stifle. I don't read him to carry his width underneath his skeleton like I would deem ideal. I still think that one's the tall-shouldered, long-sided one that's level in terms of his build. He's the most attractive in motion out here, all those things. I just wish he had a shot more pin set, hip, stifle, and power from behind. That would make this decision so much easier for me. I will tell you the one that's in second is a notch more dimensional in terms of just that extra volume of center body, extra volume of mass, and I think that one's got a bigger stifle shape. I read that one when you put him in motion to be one that gets plainer in terms of his rib and chest. He likes to tie that neck lower down into his shoulder blade, and I just don't see that one's his upper hip and pin being any bigger than the sheep that wins this particular class. So if I could change his build up from the outside and make him a notch more attractive in the way he presents himself through his chest and shoulder, I think it makes it a little bit easier for me to take those two and flop them and feel confident in what I did. But guys, let's give both of those two exhibitors a round of applause. That was a challenge, no doubt about it. I'll tell you, I like a lot of things in the sheep that's in third. I think that sheep's level spined. He's square out of his upper hip and rump. That's a sheep that in terms of volume and dimension, center body is right, fill is right. Love the way that one moves in terms of levelness, aligns out here when you put him in motion. I think a sheep, for me, that when you study this one, the longer he's out here, the more conventional he gets in his kind. He's shorter from flank to flank. He's one that doesn't have as big in terms of stoutness a feature, and maybe one that's just a notch plainer in the athleticism of his touch and his handle. If we could change that about him, we'd definitely be able to work him up higher today. Let's give that young lady applause for giving her all she's got. As we work on down the line, another one coming here in fourth, really stout featured, really big-footed sheep. He's big in his kind, he's extended. Again, another one I just wish we could give a shot more true shape, volume, and power as you read him in terms of his muscle texture in relation to the ones farther down the line or ahead of him in class. I love the look in the ewe-lamb coming next. I just, again, wish as we talk on down this set, that one gets a little staler in terms of touch and tone. I'd like to see that one a notch more athletic in the way she's built down her spine. And as we round out the class, young man sheep, in terms of volume, there's a lot of back shape, there's a lot of volume and dimension. I just wish we could crease that muscularity up, make him handle with a notch more firmness as you put your hands down his spine. Let's give this class a round of applause. Awful nice job. A lot of differences to get to talk about.
First place went to Kaylee Shockey, Cottonwood 4-H. Second went to Jaylee Joy, Cottonwood 4-H. Third went to Riley England, Cottonwood 4-H. Fourth went to Jackson Grantham, Cottonwood 4-H. Fifth went to Tegan Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H. Sixth went to Colton Nikes, Cottonwood 4-H. We need your first and second place crosses to the holding pen. Your first and second place crosses to the holding pen.
Well, again, I think another challenge presents itself in these top 3 or 4 in this class, and we'll kind of talk why, and I'll give you my idea of what I see, and I'll tell you what I see and what I don't. I think these top trio are challenging, and there's probably somebody ringside that would swap them completely different than the way I did them, and I'll tell you what I see. I think that the best presented, the best built, the best, most correct show sheep of the set is the one that's going to win for me in this particular class. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit, before I talk any goods, we're going to talk the negatives in each one that we need to change. I need to make her crisper. I need to make her with more shape. She's got to have a notch more shape to her rack, but the dimension is there. And when that young lady gets into her and gets her driving, the sheep's still plenty square. I just wish she was firmer. I think when you read that sheep, the moment that one walks in the ring in terms of build, basic build, structure, and design, that one's got the most ideal hip and hind leg. That one's the one that carries with the most extension and build to her design. She's long-sided, she's the most extended, and she's still volume down her spine. Now, where could I change her? I think she needs to be a notch trimmer. I think she needs to be a notch bigger hip, notch more powerful from behind. It's not the first time I've said that about a sheep I used to win a class, and I think she fits that bill for me in this lineup. Now, I think the sheep in second is easily the widest. I think that one's the most genuine underneath in terms of skeletal width. I think that one's the boldest in terms of body dimension all the way through. And I think that one's the biggest and squarest in terms of upper hip. I just wish from the outside we could give that sheep more growth, more extension, more elevation, and give that sheep a notch more future to his front 1/3, ideally to make him more my kind. There's a lot of things I like about the sheep in third. I think that one's stout featured, that one's rugged structured, that one's wide in terms of upper hip and pin set, and I think that one's got a really aggressive shape to his rack. I think when you read that one in terms of just smoothness today, that one's the one that we need to change in terms of skin touch and tone. I think that one in terms of spine, we need to make that one transition smoother down his spine. And then when you read him from behind, he's one that wants to get out in terms of his hock as he goes, maybe wants to roll out in terms of his hock, and maybe would like to lengthen him just a notch in terms of his hip to make that just a little bit smoother in transition. But a really nice set of 3 as we work on down the line. I think some sheep that have some differences, a young man here in fourth, one that in terms of extension, balance, and build, I like that one's foot size and bone work. I just wish we give that one more left and right. And as we work on down this set, maybe some differences in composition, differences in handle quality and athleticism or build that we would like to change to work them up higher. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause. Another really nice class. We'll go out and get you a division champion.
Class 3 crossbreeds, first place went to Clancy Conklin, Cottonwood 4-H. Second place went to Clancy Fulmar, Cottonwood 4-H. Third place, Rylan Taylor, Cottonwood 4-H. Fourth place, Aiden Cox, Brush Poppers 4-H. Fifth place, Clay Kincaid, Artesia FFA. Sixth place, Cage Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. And seventh place, Colton Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H.
Class 1, black faces to the holding pen. Class 1, black faces to the holding pen. We need your Class 1 black faces to the show ring. Class 1 black faces to the show ring.
Let's give all 6 of the exhibitors out here in the crossbred drive a round of applause. We'll also keep it going for those that didn't make it out here in this drive today. I think the quality of students, the quality of kids that you've brought out here so far today has been impeccable. I think even so, the quality of stock that's out here on the front line in contention for champion, there's a lot of good merit in terms of what's out here today. I think, again, as I'll talk through the day, you know, I'm always going to lean on sheep that have power and product and muscle and width and all those things, but we got to make them right. We got to make them complete. I think that there's one out here in this particular lineup that suits me awful well, and being a combination sheep of providing power, product, dimension, muscle, volume, and still putting those pieces together in a really nice balanced package. And then we'll go out and select that one, and then we'll study for reserve. Let's give them one more round as I pick a champion. Well, after we remove that sheep from the equation, I wanted to get to this point where I talk about the 3 sheep that are out here in contention, because I genuinely do believe that all 3 sheep out here in contention have a lot of the same positives and a lot of some things that are all the same that we would like to change. So in consistency amongst those sheep, I think that there's a lot of them that we've talked about in each class from the last trip back. I'd like to make that one bolder. I'd like to open that one up. I'd like to give that one more. I think I said that multiple times over and over, but I still think at the end of the day, after you draw that line in the sand and decide which one suits me the next best in terms of just being the sheep that follows a champion, in terms of that maturity, in terms of being right, in terms of athleticism and touch, in terms of being athletic, but still putting parts and pieces together, there is another one out here that does that job awful well. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause as they go out and pick your reserve.
Your champion crossbreed went to Peyton Putman out of Class 1, and your reserve crossbreed went to Kaylee Shockey out of Class 2. Please bring your Class 2 black faces to the holding pin. Class 2 black faces to the holding pin.
Well, I think a really nice way to start out the Blackface show here amongst these top three. Be honest with you guys, the top two, I think top two or three here kind of excel pretty quickly. There's some differences in the set all the way around. I really like the sheep that wins. I think that sheep, in terms of starting at the ground of a foundation, a one that's rugged and stout featured, yet that one's long-sided and level in terms of build, hip and hind leg design is impeccable. That one I just think puts together a lot of package in terms of muscle, in terms of quality, in terms of build, balance, and design. Is that one the most powerful sheep out here amongst this set today? No, he's not. He's got plenty, though. I think that one's got enough to go. I think that one's future of build and the way that we want to see him down the road is the one that has hit me the hardest. The most powerful sheep, the roundest bodied, the boldest muscled sheep is in second. I think that one's got a tremendous back shape. He's really, really big there. He ties into his loin edge really well. I think a sheep for me that when you read him in terms of his length from his last trip back, we could make a notch longer. And I wish we could stouten that sheep up at the ground, maybe give him just a notch more stoutness of feature and clean him up just on his shoulder blade and where his neck and chest attaches. I think a sheep in third follows that same pattern. The difference is I think that one gets a little bit shorter in terms of the length of his cannon. I think he gets a little bit more moderate in his front 1/3. I don't see as much elevation, as much extension in that sheep. And then when you step in over that one and read him in relation to the two ahead of him, the genuine turn to his body is not as wide as the depth from the top of his back to the bottom of his belly. I wish he was bolder in terms of his width all the way through his skeleton to match the two ahead of him, and I could give him a shot more extension up about how he ties his head and his neck and his shoulder blade together, young lady, and you win easy. It's an easy compromise. I think a really nice sheep to be third, one to be very proud of in terms of just quality. Next sheep coming out, a longer-sided one that's more extended, maybe a nickel trimmer in terms of handle quality. Just need to redesign that one in terms of build and balance, soften that one's flank, maybe give that one a notch stronger set of pasterns to work him up. Few sheep on down the line, they're just greener in terms of their condition. Sheep that aren't quite as mature in terms of their handle quality today, maybe could redesign them a little bit more structurally. Let's give those kiddos a round of applause. They deserve it as much as anybody. What a great way to start out our next division.
First place went to Tegan Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H. Second place went to Riley England, Cottonwood 4-H. Third place went to Bailey Dennison, Cottonwood 4-H. Fourth went to Macy Ryan, Country Clovers. Fifth went to Taylor Saltner, Artesia FFA. And sixth went to Clay Kincaid, Artesia FFA. Please bring your Class 3 black faces to the holding pin. Class 3 black faces to the holding pin. Please bring your Class 3 black faces to the holding pin. Class 3 black faces to the holding pin.
As we start to work up into our weight brackets here, I think the challenge is they become more, the sheep just become more of a challenge to sort, and they're deemably so. I think the quality is definitely increasing across the scale here, and I think that if you analyze the top 2 or 3 or 4 sheep that we have in these classes, there's some things that we could, if we could just unplug one piece from one and maybe plug it into another, if we did that with a couple of them, we could make an ideal, just perfect one. But I think the 2 that are on the very top end of this class for me do so pretty handily in terms of the quality that they possess. There's some differences in the pair. I'll tell you the difference that I see in them is that the one that wins is just in this particular weight bracket is just very, very manly. I think is very stout. He is wide underneath his build. His foot size and bone is big. He is opened up in terms of his chest rib and sternum. His back is tremendous. He's got a huge back shape, a huge forearm, and he works that into an extremely powerful hip and hind leg. Is he perfect? No, he's not perfect. If I could smooth him up in the transition of his hip loin, I think that's the one place I'd change him today. But boy, when he hits the ring, he demands your attention in terms of his stoutness and bone, his boldness of cavity and width, yet he does that, and he's still really athletic in his chest, and he's really up in his heart and his breastbone. He deserves, in my mind, to win this class. I think the challenging one, and the one that challenges him the most, is the blue one in second. I love that one propped up, young lady. When you get that one stuck right there, he's smooth, he's level, he's good built, he's big pinned. I think a sheep that when you read him in terms of the width from his shoulder blade back, he just needs to be supplied with more to beat that one. That one's big, huge backed, and I think when you analyze him there, propped up, that's where we get beat. Now, in motion, I would like to change him. When you set him in motion, he wants to get a little high in his spine. He wants to kind of kick that leg up underneath himself ever so slightly. If we could level him out in his spine and make him move just a little bit freer today, we could swap that pair pretty handily for me. I think the young lady sheep in third, that one's the smoothest in terms of transition all the way down in terms of rack shape to loin to hip. I think that one's smoothness of handle and smoothness of transition is second to none out here. I think though with that one becomes the one that needs the most width in terms of true body shape, in terms of true mass, in terms of true boldness of pin set, stifle, and hip and hind leg to match the 2 that beat him in class. That's an awful nice trio of sheep to talk that I see a lot of future and a lot of quality in. Congratulations to you, young lady. As we work on down this set, another one, young lady, that one progresses the right direction in terms of being wider pinned than shoulder bladed. I think that one in terms of body and flank is right. Smoothness of transition is there. I sure just wish we could get that one to balance up a little bit better from the outside in terms of the shoulder blade attachment that he's got in the front 1/3 of his body. If we could give him a little bit more exotic or a little more elevation, that would hit me just a shade harder in relation to his contemporaries. And as we work on down that set, again, we talk about some differences in conformation, some differences in handle quality or structural soundness that we'd like to change in that set. Let's give those kiddos a round of applause. Another really, really nice class of sheep to work through.
First place went to Kaylee Shockey, Cottonwood 4-H. Second went to Bailey Trujillo, Artesia FFA. Third went to Aubrey Putman, Country Clovers. Fourth went to Jaylee England, Cottonwood 4-H. Fifth went to Bristol Dennison, Cottonwood 4-H. Sixth went to Ryan Wood, Carlsbad FFA. Seventh went to Taylor Kennedy, Cottonwood 4-H. Eighth went to Taylor Saltner, Artesia FFA. And ninth went to Colton Ninkes, Cottonwood 4-H. Please bring your first and second place Black faces from class 1 and 2 back to the show ring. Your first and second black faces from class 1 and 2 back to the show ring.
Well, I think there's some challenges amongst the set, some differences in type and kind out here. I think the one, though, for me that I find an easy place to start or land on is the young man here towards the front of the lineup. I think a sheep that's a combination animal out here brings a lot of touch and tone. That one's rib cage and body shape are really good. That one in terms of feet and legs, movement and travel are really good. I like that sheep when this young man puts him in motion. I think that's where he excels everything out here, is the difference of that sheep's athleticism, a look, and then when you get him moving, he far surpasses the remaining set that in terms of muscularity and power have the ability to collect themselves and move as they go. I think that's an easy place for me to start. I think from there's some challenges in the difference of types and kinds that we have out here. The young lady sheep that's in second, for me, I'm going to use the term moderate, and that sheep's pushing a really fine line of being too moderate. But I think in terms of just putting together the most pieces, muscle, width, body shape, volume, dimension, I think that sheep easily in here needs to be second for me today. He's bold, he's wide, he's got a tremendous amount of power, and that sheep handle's incredibly trim to have that much muscle shape and dimension, and then he runs the right way. When you get over the top of his spine and read him from behind, he runs the right way for me today. I think the sheep that's in third, I like a lot more in terms of chest floor, in terms of length of cannon, and in terms of just stoutness of bone and length of body. However, when you read that one in motion, that one's one that wants to get too tight in terms of how he uses his hip and hind leg. And he's one that when you read him out here in terms of his contemporaries, over his spine, the widest portion of his body would be in his shoulder blade and rack. We need to open him up in terms of his upper hip, give him more stoutness as you read him right in his pin set to work him up higher today. I'll tell you, the sheep that's in fourth, for me, it suits the bill in terms of build, balance, and look from the outside, as well as anything we can have out here today. Good job, young lady. I just wish that one was more powerful. I wish he was left and right more. I wish he had more dimension as you read him through the center portion of his body all the way back to compare to the ones up here higher in class. Young lady coming out next, super square, big racked, powerful ended sheep. When we set that one in motion, he's one that wants to buck over in his knee, wants to get a little too straight and tight in terms of his front 1/3 for me to work up higher today in class. And as we work on down, just some differences again in composition. I'd like to maybe take the next one and just make him a notch wider all the way through his body and make him a notch firmer in terms of how he handles his muscle texture. And as we round out this class one that just for me gets a little bit outpowered, you love him in terms of his bone work, his stoutness of feature, his length of spine, and his just overall trimness. He's just one for me that we need to give a little bit more left and right all the way through. Let's give this class of kiddos a round of applause. Another really nice job.
First place went to Braden Fuentes, Artesia FFA. Second went to Tegan Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H. Third went to Bailey Dennison, Cottonwood 4-H. Fourth went to Clancy Conklin, Cottonwood 4-H. Fifth went to Peyton Putman, Country Clovers. Sixth went to Maylee Phillips, Country Clovers. And seventh went to Macy Ryan, Country Clovers. Please bring your Class 4 black faces to the holding pin. Class 4 black faces to the holding pin.
Well, let's give all of these kiddos out here in the first division a round of applause. What an ultra high quality set of sheep. I think these kids on the top end out here in direct contention for champion of this division. We've talked them in class, but again, I hope you can see that what's out here standing amongst the top end of this class or this division are a lot of similarities: width, muscle, stoutness of bone, ability to move, but still a reminder, guys, these are market animals. It's how much of it can you put on them and still make them look that part. And I think all three of these on the front line do that. I think they're big, they're stout, they're opened up, they're wide, and they handle the part. And then with that, they put together those package problems that we see all too often in terms of balance and build. That all comes together out here on the front line. I think there's a couple of them out here just in honesty that have hit me harder than the rest. And probably nobody's eyes are shaded by it. It's the one out of the middle class and the one out of the heavy of this lightweight division. I think those two are in direct contention. I also think the blue one in the back's in direct contention to get a piece of this division, because we've talked the quality of those. Young lady, that's nothing to take away from our Class 1 sheep. I see a lot of future in that one. Have a lot of faith in that one down the road. Trust the process of whoever's helping you get there, because that's an awful nice sheep. I think, though, that, like we said, the three in contention will be these two here on the front line out of Class 2 and 3, and the blue one. With that said, I think there's two that hit me the hardest, and that'll be the two on the front line. Which way do I sort them? I'll go show you. Give them a round of applause.
Your Champion 1 division went to Kaylee Shockey out of Class 2, and your Reserve division went to Braden Fuentes out of Class 3. We need your Class 5 black faces to the holding pin. Class 5 black faces to the holding pin. We need your Class 5 black faces to the holding pin. Class 5 black faces to the holding pin.
I think another really nice set of sheep here. 2 or 3 that rise to the top for me, a little bit different in their type and kind, but I think the most complete sheep that puts together muscularity and power and product. He's trying to catch his time in the limelight, that's all. The young lady here in the paisley shirt that starts, I think, brings genuinely the one that's put together the best in terms of both carcass merit and build. I think if you read that one right here, just at that angle alone, that one in terms of his chest, his blade, his shoulder, his levelness of top line, the build out of his hip and hind leg, I think those things are all ideal in this particular class. He's one that's still moderate in his kind, and I think that's actually aided to his advantage in this class because as I study the sheep that's second, I think he's one that's taller shouldered. I think he's one that's a notch more extended in his front 1/3, but I think that comes with labeling that sheep just a shade more exotic in his kind all the way through. Now, I will say this, I do love that sheep in terms of his back shape. He's big racked, he's got a big loin edge. I think that sheep's got a stout running gear. I think the difference is when I step over the top side of that young man's sheep and read him in relation to that one that wins, I just don't find him to be as big in his pin set, as big in his upper hip. And then when you watch him go, he has a little bit of an extra set all the way from his hip down to the bottom of his hock. When he rolls that back leg up underneath him ever so slightly in comparison. If we could change that about him, I swapped the pair. I think that's an easy decision for me. I just think the one that wins is a notch more balanced in terms of all transitions. I think the sheep that's in third is one that when you analyze it, one that's really long-sided, really extended trim, really big pinned. I love that sheep's feet and legs. Guys, I just think that one needs a notch more push. I think he needs a notch more condition today. He's a little raw in terms of his rib cage. He's one that doesn't quite tie his loin edge in quite as well as what we find. But guys, you got to love him from out here. He's long-sided, he's good-chested, he's level, he's athletic, and he's powerful, and he's got a good running gear underneath. Young man sheep that comes out next, again, another one that's really powerful. High volume, high dimension. Just one that in terms of overall balance and extension, we need to give a little more grow, we need to give a little bit more build extension, and maybe honestly pull a little bit of center body out of that one. Maybe tighten him up just a little bit, give him a little more of an athletic look. The young lady that was out here next, I know that sheep gave her a lot of troubles. If you would give her a round of applause for her fight today. That sheep's she weighs twice as much as that one. I'm going to go ahead and talk that one too. Another powerful one, that one was wide. He was dimensional, had a lot of volume. Very, very powerful type sheep. I wished he was a shade bigger boned. I wish that sheep was one that had a shade more extension and just overall maturity growth, if you will. And the young lady that rounds out this set, another one in terms of stoutness and foot size is really good. Volume and dimension, a balance is good. Just one that needs to be pried apart all the way through its skeleton to work up any higher in class today. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause as we work into our next class of the division.
First place went to Aubrey Putman, Country Clovers. Second went to Creed Hughes, Zia Sharpshooters. 3 went to Clancy Conklin, Cottonwood 4-H. 4th went to TJ Crook, Cottonwood 4-H. 5th went to Clancy Fulmar, Cottonwood 4-H. And 6th went to Aspen Cass, Brush Poppers 4-H. please bring your Class 6 black faces to the holding pin. Class 6 black faces to the holding pin.
I think in terms of just types and kinds, this has been the most challenging one to sort for me yet to this point, in terms of their quality and in terms of the differences of what I see in each sheep. I'm going to tell you, I think I could take one of each kind and put it all together into one sheep and make the one that I like the most. I think we got to make some changes in the stock all the way through, but I do deemably think that the one I start is the one that represents the most quality all the way through in terms of his build, his design, his balance, his shape, his touch, his trimness, and I think a sheep that puts all that together in a package from the outside that I really, really love to look at. That's my speed from the outside. I'll tell you where he easily dominates the remainder of his contemporaries is from the moment he walks in the door in this gate and travels. He sets himself in motion with an intense amount of structural integrity. His flexibility is really good. And then when you analyze him propped up and built, he looks awfully good from the outside. Is he the most powerful sheep out here? No, he's not. I'm going to take it from some of you that you would argue that. He's not the most powerful sheep from the outside, but I think he's the one that puts together the most power in this class and still deemably holds that together with a high-quality skeleton. I think the sheep that's in second is one that from the moment that sheep kind of hit me entering the ring, there's a lot to admire. I'll tell you where that sheep's advantages are in class. I think that sheep's advantages is in the way his hip and his hind leg is built. That sheep's got a big square upper hip. He's shapely stifled. He's dimensional, and he's wide underneath the skeleton. Maybe one for me that gets a little bit plainer in terms of his shoulder blade, and in relation to the sheep on either side of him, I want to hook him up better into how his loin ties into his hip in relation to his contemporaries, but another really nice sheep out here in terms of just volume of muscle, dimension, extension, and all those things that we talk about. I think the sheep in third, he's the rugged, stout, incredibly massive one out here. I'll challenge you all day to probably find one that's loin is any bigger than that one in terms of width, squareness, and power of that loin edge. That sheep's got a big set of feet and legs underneath him. Maybe he's one for me that just gets a little bit straighter in terms of his shoulder, a little coarser and more jammed up in terms of his design. He's not the wow factor image from the outside that I deem ideal in my mind. We could change him, give him just a shade more extension, maybe in terms of his neck and his shoulder blade, and make that one not look quite as coarse in terms of his overall makeup. I'd fall in love with that one because his back shape's big, his loin edge is gigantic, he's big in his upper hip, and he's got a stout running gear underneath. I just need to clean that one up in terms of his flexibility and in terms of his extension. Let's give that young lady a round of applause in that regard. I think the sheep that's coming out next, another one that's really long-sided and extended, a sheep that handles with a tremendous amount of raw touch of muscularity. One for me, we need to maybe see him just a little bit farther along in terms of condition. He's a little too lean to compare to the ones that are out here in this particular weight range. Maybe if we could slow him down, give him just a shade more fat and content just to smooth his body lines out, I think he stands a lot more competition out here today. Again, on down the line, power and shape, and this next one coming out's really good. Expression, maybe one for me that's just not as good in terms of how that sheep's chest and lower rib are. Maybe one that ties just a little bit plainer in terms of his hip and his loin junction. One for me that just needs to be left and right more in this particular class in terms of volume to work up higher. And I think that same song sings down to the second and third verse there. Another one with a lot of shape and expression. He's super trim. Just one for me that we've got to open up in terms of the base of his body, his skeleton underneath his running gear underneath to get him wider all the way through. And as we round out this set, another one that's expressive, really, really hard muscled, really trim, just another one that we need to maybe tone down in terms of length and extension and open that one up all the way through underneath. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause. Another really nice class, a lot of challenges to work through, a lot of differences to talk.
First place went to Creed Hughes, Zia Sharpshooters, tag 84910. Second went to Bailey Dennison, Cottonwood 4-H. Third went to Creed Hughes, Zia Sharpshooters. Fourth went to Madison Mancha, Artesia FFA. Fifth went to Jaylee Joy, Cottonwood 4-H. Sixth went to TJ Crook, Cottonwood 4-H. And seventh went to McKenna Cox, Brush Poppers 4-H. Please bring your first and second places from class 4 and 5 back to the holding pen.
Again, I think another class with some great differences to talk on the top side. I think the sheep that comes to the surface of this one for me, in terms of just raw shape and trimness and touch and handle quality, yet still putting together a propped up photo that's really nice from the outside. The young man does a really good job of getting that sheep presented. That sheep's taller shouldered than he is hipped. He's long-sided. His chest floors up in him really well. That sheep runs a really big groove down his spine. He's super trim. He handles well in that regard. I think the places that we talk about changing him individually, I think he's one that could tie just a notch smoother into his loin edge. I think he's one that could loosen his spine up a little bit when he travels. I think he wants to lunge his head forward on you. He's got a big go button, and inevitably it sometimes makes him want to get a little bit uncoordinated in how he moves skeletally. I think the sheep that's in second does a little bit better job of being looser in terms of that regard when they travel. I think that one's got a little bit more flex and give. With that, I think the sheep that's in second is one that's pushing just a little bit more fat content to me. His neck and shoulder attachment, I need to lift up. I need to put his neck more on top of his shoulder blade. And when you step in and read him, just in generality, I need to square him up in terms of his hip, make him more powerful out of his upper rump when you read him in relation to the sheep in front of him. But a really, really nice sheep for the young lady there in second. I think sheep that comes out in third, a tremendous amount of raw power. That sheep's got some ESTs in here. He's the trimmest sheep in here that has that raw touch and shape. I love his foot size and bone work. I love the way he's built skeletally in terms of his hip and his hind leg. I love the way that sheep's neck sets, probably better on top of his shoulder than the one I put in second. I just need to see more of him today. If I can get him to put on just a shade more fat, blow him apart a little bit more, a little internal body capacity, and open that sheep up all the way through, he easily stands to be winning the top end of this class for a young man. Another really nice animal out here, one to be proud of. Congratulations to you. I think as we read down the line here, some sheep that are similar in their kind. Volume and dimension is here, and the one coming out next, just one that gets a touch plainer and more mature in terms of his handle quality. He's not one that's got the added shape and expression that we find maybe ewe lamb here coming out next that we need to maybe redesign in terms of her hip and hind leg, but you have to admire her elevation of chest and front end. You have to admire the touch she's got in terms of rack shape. Kind of going down the line, same thing. Volume and dimension is definitely there. Just some sheep we need to trim up, make a notch more athletic, or provide a shot more power to work up higher today. Let's give this set of kiddos a round of applause. They deserve it just as much as everybody. Give them a round. Congratulations.
Class 6, first place, Braden Fuentes out of Artesia FFA. Second place, Eddy Fulmar, Artesia FFA. Third place, Dylan Lopez, ZS to Sharpshooters. Fourth place, Corbin Cass, Brush Poppers 4-H. Fifth place, Cage Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Sixth place, Rylan Hughes, Country Clovers. Seventh place, Cabria Hetty, Artesia 4-H. And eighth place, Maley Phillips, Country Clovers. Please bring all your Class 7 blackface to the holding pin. Class 7 blackface to the holding pin.
Let's give Division II here a round of applause. Again, as we work through each one of them, the three on the top end all, I think, represent the similarities to me, just in terms of sheep that put together muscle shape, texture, and tone, and do that with a high degree of skeletal quality. And in a perfect world, and ideally, as you see, what I try to sort through. I love sheep that are built correct, but I love sheep to balance. I love sheep to put their parts and pieces together. They've got to be built good enough to move. They've got to have enough build equality for me to want to hold the banner and stand behind them at the backdrop photo. And I think that's what sheep breeders across the country are all trying to do. I think as judges and evaluators, our duty is to find that same quality or caliber. Now, within that, everybody's going to have small differences of opinion, but at the end of the day, I still think that in my mind, if I can put one together that's athletic enough, fresh enough, puts together all the pieces muscularly, and still balances all parts and pieces together in quality, I think I've done an awfully good job. And I think that set up here, I'm very confident in, that I've got up here on the top end represent the quality that needs to be on the front end of that lineup. I think from there, there's some differences in each one's type and kind. The sheep I talked about out of the first class, just very complete in terms of touch and tone, balance and build and quality. Is that one maybe the most extended or the most ideal in terms of length of body? No, but is that one complete all the way through for his weight and his build and his body size? Today he is in his class range. I think the sheep in second, he is a notch more extended in his kind, and in relation to the sheep that he competed against, he's the one that's built the most correctly. He's the one that's designed to have the right kind of skeletal parts and pieces, and that's evident, like we talked, when we put him in motion out here and watch him go around the ring. I think the sheep that comes out of the third class, as we used the term athletic earlier, I think he out-athletes everything in his particular weight range. He's shapely, he's exotic in how he touches, he's really expressive, he's big-boned. Maybe not the one that in terms of just going today is as free and easy as he gets, but I think he handled it well enough to prop up in that kind of regard out here today, so that's what works him to the top end of his weight range. Awful nice set of sheep out here, really, really high caliber, high quality set. Give these kiddos a round of applause. I'll go grab a hold of the two that I like the most.
Your Division II champion went to Aubrey Putman, and your reserve Division II champion went to Braden Fuentes. Please bring your Class 8 black faces to the holding pin. Class 8 black faces to the holding pin.
Again, I think another set of sheep here with quality on this top end, and we're starting to get into some of that maturity we talk about that's so vitally important to smooth these things up and make them look the part all the way through. I think young lady brings a sheep in this particular class that is a really, really big combination sheep in this lineup. I think that sheep's wide. I think he's opened up. I think he's got genuine shape and power and expression, and in terms of getting your hands over his spine and handling the way he handles in terms of rack shape and product dimension, but putting that together from the second that one came in the ring and how he travels. He puts his build together, he puts his quality together, he's up in his chest floor, he's athletic in his look, he handles the part. I think that's a really nice place for me to start. Now, I'm not going to take anything away from the sheep that's in second because, guys, that's a warhorse in terms of muscle and volume. That guy's got a tremendously wide back. He's as smooth as he can be in terms of that regard. He's very big-ended. I think a sheep, when you read in comparison, he's one that's a notch plainer in terms of his body shape, and to be honest, he doesn't have that incredibly upstanding shapely rack that I find in the one that wins. He's not quite as wild in that regard, and maybe one that's neck just ties ever so slightly out of the front side of his blade in relation. If I could change that, maybe stouten him up at the ground just a notch. We're splitting some hairs on these two, but I do think that that's an awful nice sheep and nothing to be ashamed of. I think that one has a tremendous amount of power, and you've done a really good job in terms of handle quality and trimness of getting him at where he's at today. I think the sheep that's in third, another one that's just chalked up full of power. He's super stout and rugged in terms of his foot size and bone. He's a sheep that when you read him from behind has got a tremendously large hip and stifle. I think for me, he's one that comes in this lineup just a notch more in pieces. I don't know if he's quite as smooth in how he ties into his rack. I don't know if he's quite as smooth in how he ties into his loin edge. Maybe one that doesn't give me just that added extension and elevation that you find in the two that beat him in class today, but a really nice sheep in terms of power, product, and dimension. Young man does an impeccable job of getting him presented. We can congratulate him on that. I really like the sheep coming out next in terms of stoutness, expression, and power. That one's four-rib and body shape up front are incredible. He's long-sided. I love his look from the outside. Again, I just talked that same thing. He's a little raw today. I wish I could see a little bit more condition on him. I wish I could see him with another 10 pounds of just overall volume, and if so, he wins this class, and it's not even close. I think that one's big-boned. I think he's stout and powerful, and I think he handles it with an awfully good skeleton. I just wish I could have a shade more of him in terms of overall volume to work up against his contemporaries. Sheep coming out next. The next two here in terms of volume and dimension, both really good in that regard. Similar in their type and kind, maybe some sheep that are just a shade shorter fronted, maybe sheep that don't quite have the added structural integrity in terms of watching them how they go down low in their running gear in relation to sheep we've seen up higher, but sheep in terms of carcass merit, volume and quality there, do an easy job of getting up to the top end of this particular class. I think as we work on down some sheep, we just need to pry apart. We need to open up more, give more dimension, give more power as we work them up higher in class today. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause. They've done an outstanding job and another really fun class to work through. Congratulations.
First place went to Eddy Fulmar, Artesia FFA. Second went to J. Lee England, Cottonwood 4-H. Third went to Creed Hughes, Zia Sharpshooters. Fourth went to Clancy Conklin, Cottonwood 4-H. Fifth went to Jaylee Joy, Cottonwood 4-H. Sixth went to Braden Hughes, Country Clovers. Seventh went to Luke Jarva, Country Clovers. Eighth went to Kelly Jarva, Country Clovers. And ninth went to Colton Ecase, Cottonwood 4-H. Please bring your Class 9 black faces to the holding pen. Class 9 black faces to the holding pen. Please bring your Class 9 black faces to the holding pen. Class 9 black faces to the holding pen. Attention on the fairgrounds, if you are in a maroon Honda Civic, license plate PLC 680, you are going to get towed in 10 minutes. You're not supposed to be parking where you're parking. 10 minutes.
I think, again, as we work through just this particular set of sheep here, the top end rises up pretty quick for me on these top 2 or 3. And I'll tell you, the top 2 are the ones that I think easily position themselves where they're at. And I think there's some differences within the pair, but I think they're both high-quality sheep. The one that wins for me within this particular group is the smoothest. He's the complete fault-free kind of sheep that, in terms of having some muscle shape and expression and freshness, he does all of those things, and he blends all of his parts and pieces together very smoothly, and that's why he gets where he is, and it's easy for me to find. He's not only the most dimensional sheep out here of this set, he's the most dimensional sheep to still carve out that kind of a look from the outside. And that's important. He blends his loin edge the smoothest, he ties his body cavity together the best, and I think that's where we land on. That's what makes it hard on the, I'm gonna tell you, I love a lot of things about this blue sheep in second. I like in terms of his rib cage and his forebody. I love the shape to his rib. I love the stoutness of foot size and bone. I love the expression that sheep's got. I do not read him to be as bold in terms of the width of his rack. I do not read him to tie in good enough in terms of his loin edge up here at this kind of a weight comparison. I think sheep on both sides of him tie that loin edge in smoother to his upper hip and rump. But guys, you've got to admire that one in terms of his build, the way he looks from the outside, and his chest floor, his balance, his bone, his stoutness, and how he moves around the ring with that. I love those things about him. I just wish I could see him a little bit more mature in his center body and tie him together better there at his hip loin. I think the sheep that's in third mimics that, both of those two in a lot of ways. That one's another one that's good chested, he's good footed, he's stout featured. I love the freshness to that sheep's back. He's incredibly good racked, he's incredibly fresh loined. Young lady, when we get in behind him and read him from his last rib back, he just gives up enough in terms of width and power right through here that I wish we could pry him apart. I wish we could bust him open in terms of the stifle shape and just give him more power from behind to meet the two ahead of him up higher in class. But a really nice sheep to be proud of. Congratulations to her. As we work on down another couple sheep here that have next young man coming out in fourth, tremendously powerful, tremendously expressive and shapely. Another one for me though that gets a little bit pieced together, if you will. We need to kind of clean him up in terms of his chest floor, maybe make that sheep a little bit more youthful in the way he ties his rib and his chest together, and lengthen him out in his dock, maybe just design him better out of his hip and his hind leg, work him up higher today. Another one in terms of product and dimension, really nice coming out next, just not quite as stout featured, maybe one that's got a little extra condition and cover for his size. Maybe like to see him maybe a class or two down in terms of his weight range to be a tad more competitive in that regard. Another one coupled. These next two coming out really expressive, really extended. Sheep have a tremendous amount of touch. Maybe for me, they're ones that we just need to redesign from the outside, make them a notch more attractive in their build and their balance to work them up higher in class today. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause. Another really nice class. I think we've got one more before a division. Congratulations to all of them.
First place went to Bailey Trujillo, Artesia FFA. Second went to Eddy Fulmar, Artesia FFA. Third went to Aubrey Putman, Country Clovers. Fourth went to Jace Carrasco, Loving 4-H. Fifth went to Clay Kincaid, Artesia FFA. Sixth went to Aiden Cox, Brush Poppers 4-H. Seventh went to Rylan Taylor, Cottonwood 4-H. Eighth went to Taylor Kennedy, Cottonwood 4-H. And ninth went to Jackson Grantham, Cottonwood 4-H. Please bring your first and second places from class 7 and 8 to the holding pin. Your first and second places from class 7 and 8 to the holding pin.
as we round out our last class of sheep here today, I think there's some differences in the top 3 or 4 here to discuss, but ultimately I think that the young man's blue sheep here is going to easily kind of rise to the top of this set. I think one that foundationally is the most correct on his feet and legs. He travels the best in terms of his build out here. He's a sheep that puts together the most balance and design with muscle and carcass merit out here today. In a perfect world, maybe we could clean him up just a little bit in terms of his blade to chest ratio. That's being overly critical in this class of that sheep, but I think he fits the bill awful well to be out here on the top end. The young lady sheep that's in second, I think in terms of muscle and product, that sheep's got a tremendously large back. He's probably the widest one out here in terms of overall width and body shape and muscularity working down that sheep's back. I don't find him to be built quite as well. I need to bring his neck up higher onto his shoulder. I need to redesign his hip and hind leg, as he's got a little extra set to that. For me, if we could change that about him, stouten him up underneath, he runs easily with the sheep that wins, but an awful nice pair to talk about. Congratulations to you. I think the sheep that's in third, very, very dimensional, very, very product oriented, a sheep that in terms of stoutness of foot size and bone is second to none probably all day. I think that one's the biggest bone that we've seen all day, the stoutest featured all the way through, but maturity-wise with him, I'd honestly like to clean him up just a notch, make him a notch more athletic in his touch and his muscle shape, but a sheep that you have to admire out here in terms of balance and levelness of line, stoutness of feature, and overall volume of muscle, and I think that's where the sheep in fourth, we could swap that pair, and I wouldn't argue with you in different kinds, because that sheep's a notch more exotic. He's one that's more extended, maybe a notch trimmer in terms of how he handles. Again, I just don't find that one in terms of width and back and width and hip and pin set to be quite as wide, quite as dimensional all the way through as what we have in the sheep that are kind of up there ahead of him in class. Again, that kind of same song, second verse, another really nice sheep in terms of extension and expression of muscularity. I just need to see that guy a little farther along in terms of composition, maybe drop him down in his flank and clean him up in his chest floor just a notch. Same here coming next, another sheep that I actually like in terms of balance better. I think that one's smoother in terms of his lines all the way through. I just don't find him to be a stout, and I don't find him to be as overall powerful. I need to open him up down his spine and through his sternum to get him more dimensional and work up higher. As we round out this class, probably a trimmer handling sheep that's got a notch more shape, just one for me build and balance wise we need to redesign, and how that one uses his hip and hock. Let's give these kiddos a round of applause. Another nice job. Really, really nice way to round out our classes. Let's go get you a division champion.
Your champion and reserve of your Dorsets, Crosses, Division 1 and Division 2 Blackface to the holding pin.
Let's give these exhibitors out here in the heavy division a round of applause. Well, I think as we kind of round out getting sorted through the last set of heavyweight market sheep that have kind of reached their endpoint goal, I think this set is just as any that we've looked at all day. I think there's some opportunities to talk about sheep that, you know, we may have mentioned earlier in terms of having those pieces that you want to get to. These sheep have those in terms of putting all the parts of muscularity and expression and power together, and then doing that while smoothing out their body lines and their composition and all of those things. I think we've gotten to that point. I think the 3 sheep on the front line represent what I deem the most ideal in terms of market lambs. And at this weight range, I think that we've put together an awful nice set. I'm confident in the 3 that stand up front being high quality. They may not all be exactly alike, and I know that we can't probably put them all exactly alike at one particular show, but I do think that when you analyze the differences in each one of these 3, you still come back down to the remaining factor that they're all quality in their build, they're all quality in their body shape and their muscularity. They're all quality on their feet and legs. I think there's some differences in the 3 of them. I think the sheep that, you know, out here in contention, on the front line, the sheep that starts out in our first class, again, we talked about a sheep that is incredibly creased up in terms of his rack shape, one that's dimensional in terms of power and product. A sheep for me out here in this lineup, I think puts together an awful nice look in that regard as well. I think the sheep out of the second class, in terms of putting shape and expression and raw muscularity on that one, his body cavity is as good as we have out here, period, in terms of his rib cage, the shape to his body, the shape to his back. I think that he's done an awfully nice job in that regard. Is he maybe the overall most powerful or the stoutest one that you deem? No, but I think you've noticed that I've kind of strayed away just a little bit from being a little too rugged in terms of that regard to build him good enough. I think that sheep balances really well from the outside. I think he puts together athleticism, muscle shape, and touch. I think a sheep that comes out of the next class in terms of just power and dimension and product, I think that sheep is, again, another one that follows in that same suit. He's one that handles with an intense amount of freshness. I think he's one that in terms of just overall body composition and volume does a really, really good job in that regard. I think when you set him in motion, you watch that sheep go, and you like a lot of things about his freedom of skeleton and how he moves. Maybe a sheep that when you analyze his rib cage and his chest and his sternum, maybe not quite as good as the 2 ahead of him in class, but I'm talking about 2 that I think have put together really, really, really good chest floors and rib cages. Is he bad there? No, he's not bad there. He's just not as elite or ideal as what those 2 in front of him in that position are, but another really nice sheep in that regard. I think it's been an awful, awful big challenge out here on these 3. I think there are 2 that suit me awful well. Let's go ahead and give these kiddos a round of applause, and we'll come back out and get you a champion of this division and select an overall champion.
Your Division 3 champion went to Bailey Trujillo, and your reserve went to Eddy Fulmar.
Let's give all the exhibitors out here in your champion drive a big hand. Some of them have been out here all day long, probably. I don't know how many sheep. I think they said 4 you can show per exhibitor, and have been out here all 4 times, and maybe there may be 1 or 2 of them out here that have only been out here once today. And one thing I will say in that regard is that, in my mind, you guys have the ability to, you know, I had asked him when I got here, you guys have a lot of sheep to go through today, and that's because the county fair, typically where I'm from, you only see, you know, 40 to 60 head of sheep because each exhibitor could show 1. So I would be blessed and would love to be able to show multiple. It would not be really good on the pocketbook, but I understand it gives your kids opportunity. So where I'm going with that is you guys have had a tremendous amount of opportunity today, and I want you guys to know that as of county fairs that I've judged, this may be one of the toughest ones I've ever judged. So take that home and stick that in your back pocket and know that, because I've sorted a lot of them, and there's usually, like I had mentioned, there's usually you know, 2 or 3 people that show up there that are a little bit more advanced than everybody else, and I'm here to tell you folks that there are a lot of kids out here that understand what's going on. So whether that be the kid all themselves, I know it wasn't. You 10 that are out here, you didn't do it on your own. You did it with an ag teacher or an extension agent. You did it because of a parent. You did it because somebody pushed you to be better than what you are. Today, you need to be better tomorrow. I will challenge you kiddos out here to one thing. This is my passion every day. You know what? The sheep are fun, and I love it, okay? That's what I grew up with. It's a big thing to me. But it means more to me to see you guys out here sweating, which I'm going to tell you, you don't know. Be grateful, because you don't know what sweating is. I left 85% humidity, 106 degrees, and I will tell you this is a vacation. This, to me, is vacation. So be grateful for those that are standing outside the ring, whether you win or you lose. You know what? I'm going to tell you something. How many of you in here, let me ask, I'm just going to take a poll. I'm going to ask you a question. What do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be a lawyer.
What about you?
I haven't really decided that.
Fair. What about you, young lady?
I want to be a veterinarian.
I want to be a vet.
I haven't decided.
Couldn't tell you.
A livestock judge.
I was waiting for that, hoping I'd catch it at least once. So I'm going to tell you something, young lady, and I'm going to tell all of you 10. What I'm doing over here is a thankless job. Period. Bottom line, it's a thankless job. There will be 2 people that leave here happy, and there will be a lot of people that leave here fiending for more, okay, that want to win or want to come back and do this again the next time. But at the bottom line, at the end of the day, period, you do this to make yourself better tomorrow than you are today. Because our country needs you. They need you. Because what my job every day is to look at a kid, parents, students, ag teachers, extension agents, is to look at a kid every day when they're happy and when they're at their worst. And I've got to deal with them from 7:20 to 3:55 no matter what. I have to. I can't tell them to go sit in a room and stare at the wall because I will end up on the news. But what I can say is that when you are at your best, and what I mean by this is for those of you that win, when you leave here, you shake everybody's hand because you may need them down the road someday. This is the only industry that we can stand out here as fierce competitors and then pull over on the highway and change the competitor's tire, right? Yeah, be proud of that. And if you lose, you keep your head high. If you lose, you keep your head high. Because I'm going to tell every one of you, you have got to learn how to lose before you'll ever learn how to win. You have got to. Take that from somebody that's lost more than he's ever won. Be proud of what you do. Be proud of who's behind you. And be proud of who you want to be. We all take that into account. Everybody's good with that? That's all that I ask. There's a couple of sheep out here, folks, that have hit me hard. They may not be everybody's kind, but they're my kind. I've tried to sort them and keep my head down in this ring and find your kids, push your kids, and find the sheep that I like. And I will tell you, no matter what, when I leave here, I'm confident in the ones that I think are or can be or will be or deemed elite today. This is an awful good ring to get to pick them in. Give these kiddos a round of applause. I'll go find you a champion in reserve.
Your grand champion market lamb went to Bailey Trujillo, and your reserve grand champion market lamb went to Kaylee Shockey.